What do you do when someone steals credit for your work? Do you speak up? Do you say keep quiet? Do you confront them right away? Let's talk about that today. Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe we when you communicate better, you live better. I'm Chris, one of your hosts, and I'm always joined by Lucy. Lucy, how are you today?
I am good, and I look forward to having some time off next week, where I'm gonna have some
Good for
time to
you.
strategize to balance out the business. What about
Good
you?
for you. Good for you. I'm doing okay. Just been busy. But
Hmm.
I don't want to let this go by. I know that when you listen to this episode, it's going to be sometime in the new year, but this is December when we're recording and we're celebrating 1 year of this podcast, which is very nice.
Yay!
What an accomplishment. I never realized that so many podcasts start and don't make it past like 6 or 7 episodes, Lucy. So it's
Wow. Kudos to
impressive that we've even
us.
lasted a year.
That's another win. I love it.
Here we go to 8 more years and then we'll stop.
Yeah, to us. It is a good number.
Well, Lucy, for today, this is something that I've seen a lot. I personally haven't experienced it. I've had to confront coworkers for different things, but
Mhm.
I've been fortunate. I don't think anybody's ever stolen credit for my work, at least not to my face, not in front of me. But what about for you? Have you experienced this before?
I cannot remember any time either uh, that somebody would be stealing the credit. No.
What I
And
have
I,
seen, go
mhm.
ahead.
I'm also thinking maybe I wasn't even focused on that. Like this is has to be my credit. More looking at the let's as a team. Let's do it. As long as it gets done, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Um, and also
What
I
I have
worked a lot
noticed,
by myself, so
oh
there was
yeah, that maybe
nobody else
that's
to
why.
steal.
That's why, because nobody is there to steal your credit.
No.
What I have noticed, which I feel bad about, and once a coworker brought this up to me, and I felt bad, and I started trying to fix it. Is we would be in a team meeting. It was like a 4 or 5 of us, and she would say an idea, and I would think maybe I would think it was a good idea or whatever, but I would just kind of repeat it because I thought it was a funny idea or a cool idea, and then they wouldn't hear her say it; they would just hear me say it, and they would say, "Chris, great idea," and I didn't think about it because I was repeating what she said, so I didn't think about it. But she pointed it out to me, and not in a confrontational way. She was
Interesting.
just like
Yes.
pointing out because it was infuriating to her, but also funny that it kept happening over and over again.
Um,
And I felt bad, so I think once she started saying that, I started saying, "Well, Bethany had this idea," or whatever. I would point it back to
oh,
her to help say, "Well, she
nice.
had this idea, not me." I'm just repeating it.
That reminds me of possible another episode that we could have around topic between the gender roles. Because that actually
Yeah.
happened. That happened in the past to me when I didn't care about yes getting the credit at the time. I was like, I need to get this done. And when I shared the idea, the leader was like, no, no, I don't think that would work. I
Hmm.
noticed whenever my guy coworker would say an idea, oh, good idea, buddy. Yeah, let's look into it. So I told him to tell the boss that
Yeah.
idea. It did go through.
Hmm.
Um,
So you're using it to
so
your advantage. Yeah.
yes, yes. But that might be for another possible
Right,
episode
right, right.
looking at the other topic when
Yep.
when it's happening. Even though it's connected. And kudos to you for giving back the credit to her and really having her feel hurt in that
Yep.
situation.
So yes, I am great. Thank you. I am fantastic.
Of course
Um,
you are.
but seriously, so on a real note, why is this so important? Aside from just making us angry, why is it
Hmm.
so important for credit going to where credit should be due?
That's a great question. I would say a sense of fairness. If people feel they are not and see they're not being treated fairly, and somebody else is getting rewarded for their hard work, it can be extremely demotivating. So it's definitely not creating a supportive, trusting environment in the workplace for the team collaboration. It can really decrease the trust on the team, and therefore communication and collaboration can get worse. And therefore the
Yeah.
team results can also go down, and therefore the company's productivity and performance might go down.
Right.
If
Right.
people
Why
start
bother?
backstabbing, yep,
Yeah, why
or
bother
why
sharing
bother?
ideas or activities or sharing data or helping you finish your tasks? Why even do that if you're just
Exactly.
gonna backstab me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
So there are specific real consequences of this when it doesn't get addressed.
Yeah. I would add also that I think for a lot of us who believe in meritocracy, like if you work hard, our work should speak for itself. I think the reality is that who gets credit matters for
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
If you don't, if it's not you that's seen as doing the work, it doesn't mean it means that you're not working as hard in perception, right?
Yeah.
Perception is everything. So
Yes. Yep.
it just means that you may not be open up to other opportunities, other projects, other tasks, other
Exactly.
advancement opportunities because you're just
Yep.
not seen as doing the work. So
Yep.
whether better for good or bad, you're just it's important to do that.
Yeah, I'm hearing it can really sabotage their career progression and
Yeah,
opportunities, possibly
right.
even salary with that.
So then
Um,
let's move into what to do, what not to do, because I think because we can spend forever just thinking about like the overall things, but um, what would you say? What should we not do in this when we're confronted with the situation of someone's taking credit for our work?
so one of the first things that comes up for me is start screaming at them in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of the meeting, maybe. That would not
Yeah.
be professional or beneficial to the situation.
Right.
Um, what comes up for you as a second thing, what not to do?
I think assuming bad intent. I think
Mm,
it's all too easy for us to assume that they're purposely trying to
a good one.
backstab us or get in our way, and especially if it happens over and over again. I think it's very
Yeah.
clear, or it's very easy to say they're just doing this because they either hate me because they just do this to everyone. They're trying to backstab everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they are doing it to everyone, but it doesn't mean that they're purposely wanting to push everybody down. They're just doing it for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say maybe next one might be trying to punish them in some way or backstab them back or hurt
Oh
them in some
yeah,
other way. Like
no
not, let's say,
retaliation.
yeah, let's say I'm not gonna share this important piece of information with them, and therefore their project might get delayed
Yeah.
because they don't have that important piece of information.
But why not? I mean, I guess that to play devil's advocate, like if it doesn't affect us, right? If it's a project like they're working on by themselves and it
Mhm.
doesn't affect us, why wouldn't somebody want to retaliate and just hold back data or delay giving data?
Well, I would say it could be a natural instinct to to punish
Sure.
back, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then is that the best strategy? Well, of course, everything is contextual. We don't know the specific situation. Some situations when there's nobody else to support them, I don't know if that would be the best strategy, but there are consequences of that.
Hmm. What are I mean, in your mind, what are the consequences? Because I'm thinking like if it doesn't affect me, like what
Mhm.
could the consequences be of me not giving you data or giving you information you need?
So for me personally, um, it wouldn't be aligned with how I want to show up with people.
Mm. Fair.
So that would not be, aligned with my values, how I want to be. So that
Yeah.
would create some internal pressure and stress for me.
I think that's fair. Yeah, it could go against
Um,
your own values. You could just start going down a road of ending up
like
being like
turning
them.
into somebody that I don't like to be that person. So
That's
I would
true.
lose myself in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, I'm constantly focusing on the other person rather than on focusing what's important to me.
Mm, mm. Yeah, then it becomes about the other person. It kind of takes over your world. You're absolutely right,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I think also it's similar to that. It just becomes like a cycle, a self-perpetuating cycle that just kind of gets worse and worse because then you're
Yeah.
withholding data. They're assuming you bad intent on your part, which it is in this situation.
Yep.
So then they start withholding data, and so now it just becomes a full blown conflict, and then now there's
Yeah.
drama, and
Yep.
then if you gossip, I don't know if you were
Oh,
gonna say
yeah.
that, but like don't gossip about it, because then now you're
Mhm.
drawing other people in, and then it becomes a real
Oof.
battle within the whole team or the whole organization.
And then the work becomes so stressful.
Yeah.
And we
Yep.
spend a lot of time at work.
Yeah.
So then what is the impact on your family life when you come home stressed out from all the drama at work and
Yep.
drained?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So there is
Exactly.
a high cost we are paying,
Absolutely.
possibly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So then anything, what else would you try to avoid in these kind of situations?
So we mentioned assumptions, not to assume the worst intent. Um, Not asking any if we don't give them even a chance to explain, and we already make the which connects to the assumptions. Yeah, anything else that's coming up for you? I think we addressed
Here's
the
here's one that
most.
I've seen, and I think and I agree with, is don't feel like you need to take credit for everything.
A good one.
Sometimes it's okay to just let it go. If they take credit for something small, or
Yeah,
something minor, or it's okay to share credit sometimes. Just let them have the credit. So what do you think about that idea?
well, that's a good one. What's coming up for me is how do you know when to let go and when to really say no? This is not acceptable and set the
Yeah.
boundary.
Yeah. Well, that goes into one of the things I want to talk about in terms of what to do. So how do you address it? And I think that's one of the first things I want to share is, or talk about, is you have to assess how severe it is. How big
Mm,
is their stealing credit? Is it for, you're doing a presentation? Is it them doing, like, saying they made the slide when you didn't? Is it them
mm,
saying they did the entire project or did the entire work all by themselves? Are they taking credit for some of the analysis you did
mhm,
specifically? Some of it doesn't really matter, right? Like if they want to say they made the slides, does it really matter if they made the slides or not? Maybe not, probably not, in my mind at least, for the
mhm,
presentation. If they say that they took credit for, or they did the analysis that you did, or that they did
mhm,
everything of a group project, that matters a
mhm.
little more in my mind.
Yeah.
But severity, I think, kind of matters. Does it really
Mm.
matter whether you get credit for a specific thing or not, or whether the work you did like really means a lot that you did this?
So it could be asking, let's say, how relevant this, if I don't get the credit, would that hurt me in my career progression, possibly? So if it's something small, like making a slide, might not, but creating the analysis, creating the data, analyzing the data properly and suggesting new ideas, that might be already more impactful if somebody else
Yeah.
gets the credit. Hmm. So yeah,
Yeah.
kind of pause and reflect, I'm hearing, as one of the first steps, rather
Right.
than
Right.
react.
I mean, that's all we ever talk about, right? Like, how do we be more intentional and be how do we respond instead of just reacting in the moment out of
Yeah,
our gut?
that's true because the survival brain wants to go there and respond right away and do
Yeah.
something. There's also one other thing I just remembered. Um, we didn't say what not to do anything with it.
Hmm.
No matter how big the theft is of the credit, say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. Um, I've
Yeah.
noticed sometimes let's say when there's been even some trauma in the past, it's almost the learned helplessness when we feel we don't have a
Hmm.
voice, we don't have a say, and if we say something, it's going to be turned against us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
That's
noticing the
true.
tendency when we never speak up for ourselves, no matter what happens.
Yeah. 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 Right. Because it could be you not say anything, even if it was a minor thing, it could be seen
Yeah,
as they're okay with this, so I'm
it's
just gonna
okay.
doing more of
Exactly.
it.
So people even don't know you have a problem with it.
Yeah. Very right. Absolutely. Great point.
So sorry, back to now what to do. So speak up
Yeah.
when you
Well, address
feel this is
severity.
that
Yeah. Address
matters.
the
Yes.
severity. What else what
Yes.
else would you do?
Be really clear on expectations, responsibilities, and division of the work and
Yeah.
document it. So then when somebody is trying to say, no, I did it, looking at here's a lot of documentation proving this is what I created, this is what I added, the value.
Yeah.
And be
That speaks
proactive.
to
Hmm.
that's exactly it. Be proactive. I think it's incredibly important to document what's happening so you can be clear about what everybody's contribution is,
Yeah.
right? That way you can be clear with your supervisor, like, hey, we have this project. This person from this
Yeah.
other department did this. I did this. Timmy did this. Lucy did this.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear right away. This is the work we're all doing together, right? That idea of being
Yeah.
proactive is good. Um, I've seen also some people suggest, like, if you're doing a presentation, having a slide
Mm-hmm.
at the end that lists all the people that worked on it and their contribution.
Oh,
That
that's a good
way,
one. I like
it's
it.
not about me just saying in the moment, right? If you're
Yeah.
presenting something, now if it's an idea
Mm.
there's no way to like show a slide if you're just brainstorming somebody, right?
Yeah. I like that. Kind of proactive giving credit to everybody and thinking about who else contributed to this. I love it.
Yeah.
Hmm. What else would be what to do? So when we said don't make assumptions, have
Yeah.
a conversation with the person.
Yeah. Literally just ask why. I think it's too easy to assume bad intent.
Mm,
And, people, if we go in with that, maybe they did it for bad intent. You don't know that though. And so
mm,
it's important to just rule that out, right? Stay professional in these kind of
mm,
situations because it's possible that, some people are just not good at public speaking. They get nervous. So
true.
maybe they intended to say, we thought of this idea, but in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, their brain is just kind of freezing up and they say, I thought of this
Yeah.
idea, right? And so they
Mm-hmm.
didn't
It's
intend
possible.
to.
Yeah.
They just had this brain freeze and they just stuttered and they said, I thought of this,
Yeah.
right? And they don't know how to go back because they
I
feel
like
bad
that.
about it.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So kind of having also empathy for the other person. Let's say this is and giving them benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And one other thing's coming up for me around having a conversation, being calm during that conversation,
That's right.
and rather than attacking them, I think just I want to understand what happened.
Yeah.
Sometimes even the question why, even though it's a great question, sometimes even the word why can be triggering for some people because they feel blamed.
Yeah.
So maybe help me understand what happened. This is I actually remember this is, I sent you email with this idea that day. And in that meeting you've mentioned it was your idea, but help me understand what happened.
So then let's go into that conversation. Let's say you are going to have that conversation with that person. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, I need to talk to Lucy
Yeah.
about this because this is whack. So how would you prepare for that? Number one, I guess you would have to make sure you have the evidence
Yes.
that you did this thing
Mm-hmm.
or you had the idea,
Mm-hmm.
um, or you even talked about it, just even remembering
Yes.
like, hey, last week we talked about this, whatever, blah,
Yeah.
blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. But having that evidence, what else would you want to make sure you prepare ahead of time?
Usually when I help clients prepare for difficult conversation, what is the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst reaction the other person could have?
Mm,
And what would be your response to that?
yeah,
Prepare also emotionally.
that's it. Yeah.
How can you keep yourself calm
How are you
when
going to
to
stay
say
calm and
yes?
curious? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you would add? How to prepare for this conversation?
I think think through what your goal of the conversation is. And so
Mm.
it might have to be a range. It might like the ideal
It's a good
outcome is
one.
they agree and they feel bad and they say sorry.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't do that, what's the next thing you're okay with getting, right? Like um the negotiation they call the zone of a potential agreement. So like what's the
Mm-hmm.
least you're willing to accept, right?
Yes.
Is the
Mm-hmm.
least you're willing to accept that they acknowledge that it wasn't right, even if they don't say anything else or whatever,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or they admit that it was your idea, whatever it is. But you got to figure out like what's the least you're willing to walk away with,
It's a good one.
and what do you need as a result of this? Do you need them to say they're sorry? Do you need them to um, acknowledge it and send an email to everybody
Yeah.
saying sorry about this, my bad?
Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
um, but what's the least also, like in the event that they won't accept those things or they feel threatened so they're not going to agree to those things,
Mm-hmm.
what are you willing to at least walk away with?
I like that. And I wonder if one of the next steps could be also what is the boundary in case it happens again in the future?
Yeah.
How many times would you have the conversation before you take the next step and how to communicate
Right.
that? And
Right.
what would be the next step? Talking to HR, to another leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it a pattern or is it just an isolated
Mm-hmm.
incident? Like it
Mm-hmm.
was a slip up during a presentation
Yes.
versus
Mm-hmm.
during almost every brainstorming, you say an idea ahead of time and they take credit saying that was their idea. That's a pattern, right?
Yes. Yeah. And when they try to even, say, no, well, you didn't say that, I said that, kind of almost
Yeah.
gaslighting in the worst case scenarios, let's say. Hopefully that doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. Let's hope not. But let's go into the actual conversation. Let's break it down. And so you said you like to use the word help me understand. Um, I I agree. I think we agree. Don't say why because
Mhm.
why is pretty threatening. Although there are times you can say
Can be.
why.
Yeah. It
Um,
depends also on the tone of voice
right, right. That's the tone of voice is what I
and the
want to bring up is
energy.
because
Yeah.
I can't use help me understand because when I try to use that, it sounds condescending or aggressive.
Ah,
So I have to say something
that's a
like
good one.
I noticed that like when I bring up these kind of things, I have to say, Lucy, I noticed you said that this idea was yours during the meeting. I know we just talked about it last week, and I had this idea from our brainstorming session. So, what happened there?
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
like to leave it even more open ended, but because that's just the only
Mm-hmm.
way that I can say it
What happened? Yeah,
open minded and authentically. I think it depends on your personality and your tone of how
personality.
you're saying it.
Yeah. For me, it's like, I want to understand what happened.
Yeah.
I want to know your perspective, your side of the story. Yeah.
Right, right. Like yeah, I always feel jealous or envious of people who can say, "Help me understand," and it sounds super open and compassionate and warm because I just can't say it that way. It sounds just condescending if I say it like I'm saying it to a little kid.
That's fine. That's a good point that you're bringing up. I think really we need to think what sounds authentic to us. What can we say without having that negative feeling around it, maybe. Um,
Yeah, right.
where we can be genuinely open and curious rather than feeling yeah, that doesn't fit to how I would say it.
Yeah.
Um, so oftentimes also it's not exactly about the exact words. It's really about what is the energy, and
Hmm.
how can we portray that energy?
Right,
Because
right.
there's no perfect conversation. We try to make it perfect,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Well, and I think that's how I think the whole goal is if you go in with the mindset of let me be curious to figure out why this is happening
yeah,
the to the degree that they're willing to even engage in the conversation and talk and share and how insightful
yeah,
they are even why if they know why they're doing it because I think it goes down to what is the reason this is happening. Is this truly they just messed up, they don't really know that
yeah.
they're doing it, or even if it is something that they're they want to build their own career, they don't realize that they're stepping on other people to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give them the benefit of the
Yeah.
doubt versus maybe they are doing it intentionally. Maybe they are purposely trying to push everybody down. And that's a different set of issues to consider and
True.
explore.
Yeah.
Right. Um, yeah, because we could talk about questions all day. Maybe we should do an episode just like how to ask good questions because
Mm,
like when I think about
brilliant.
questions also, I notice a lot of people do this wrong is in these kind of situations, they'll try to do Socratic questioning, which is they'll try to ask questions in a very leading way to try to
Oh
get you
yeah.
to come to a conclusion that they have.
We agree, right? It's not actually a question. Yeah.
And that's not like people know that that's happening, and that's like they're very defensive against that. It doesn't work in these kind of conversations. It works probably in a
No.
class, in a classroom. It does work if you're trying to get people to students to
Yeah.
understand logic and reasoning in a certain way. But in these kind of situations,
Mm.
leading the witness is very noticeable, and they get very upset and angry about that. So it's
I
not like,
agree.
hey, do you remember the
Yeah.
conversation we had last week? Do you remember what we talked about? Do you remember who came up with the idea? Like those are all very leading
Leading
questions that like
questions.
it's easier to just say,
Yeah.
hey, just say what you have to say. Like, hey, remember, last week we had this conversation and I talked about this idea, and so today you brought up the idea as if you had the idea. So what's going on here?
It reminded me, so there's a more direct way of communication, when the do you remember this, kind of hoping that they will say yes, oh, I'm sorry, or the kind of less
Yeah.
direct.
Right.
And even the less direct way, sometimes I hear clients, but I'm not comfortable to talking directly to that person
Yeah.
because maybe they're worried about or in the situation that the leader took the credit for their idea, which
Hmm.
might be more, how do you give that feedback to your leader?
Yeah. Yeah.
That might be a trickier situation because they might be having more at stake in case the conversation doesn't go well.
Yeah. And so in those kind of situations, if you really
Mm-hmm.
don't feel comfortable saying like, Lucy, last week we talked about this and I gave you that idea. If you don't feel comfortable saying that, that's fair. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't say that. And I think sometimes in communication we are taught to take away some of those softener words. Like I think, I
Mm,
feel.
yeah.
I think it's okay to intentionally use those things and double
Mm,
check. Like, hey Lucy, last week I know we were just talking about the same topic and I feel like we talked about this, and I feel like this is I feel like we talked about this idea, um,
mm,
and I thought we had come to an understanding that we had talked about this together. So, what was your memory of that conversation?
mm. That's a good approach. So really soften the message in a way. In
Right.
those
It's
situations when you're not sure about the reaction or it's really sensitive.
yeah, yeah. I think the key
Mhm.
is you're still being soft, and it still can be
Yeah.
seen as too passive. The trick is you're using it intentionally. You're trying to soften
Yeah.
it on purpose so that you're not directly accusing and you're giving them a chance to get out, but you're also
Yeah.
being very open about what they remember. So it's
Yes.
not saying, do you remember that we talked about this? It's what do you
Hmm.
remember about that conversation? So you're guiding
Yes.
them to force them to remember something about the conversation.
Hmm. And share something. And you're still dealing with the situation rather than saying, no, I cannot say anything because it's my boss. It is what
Right.
it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's at some point you will have to say it was your idea,
Yeah.
right? Whether you say it there, whether you
Hmm.
bring it up to them straight, or whether they keep thinking that it was their idea or they thought of it or they just keep denying that you even thought of the idea.
Hmm.
There's no way, like, you can't force somebody to think something else or say something they
True.
don't want to say, so you have to eventually say it and see where it lands and see what happens.
And you can also document that. You did say that. You had the conversation.
Yeah.
Let's say if there are other behaviors from that boss that might not be the
Right.
best. As
Right.
long as you document it, then you can also have HR possibly be on your side. If you don't
Yeah.
document, there's not much they can do to help you
Right.
in case it gets to that situation. Hopefully not.
Yeah, but you can at least document that you had
Yeah.
the conversation and that you disagreed on where the idea
Yes.
came from or who did the work on this thing.
Yeah.
um would you send that email to your boss, or would you just document that, keep that somewhere?
That's a good question. I would not send that email probably to the boss. Well, we did disagree about that one. Unless you can put it in a softer way, but I cannot see that that might be strange. But maybe being more proactive about future. When you
Hmm.
share your ideas, maybe share them in writing.
Yeah,
These are the ideas I wanted to
that's
bring to
hard.
the meeting. Yeah, it could be a
Yeah.
tricky situation
Right. Yeah, it might you
if
might
that's a
have
boss.
to.
Yeah.
I don't know, because you're right. I Part of me thinks you should email it, but not like I had this idea, you didn't. It's more, we had this conversation, we disagreed about where this idea came from, or
Uh,
we talked about who had the idea, or we just talked about this idea,
yeah.
and going forward we're going to do this, right? Just to document that you even
That's a
had the
good one. Yeah.
conversation. But I guess, yeah, would you say it? I don't know. It'd be interesting for a listener. What do you think? It'd be interesting to see
Mm.
what the listeners
Would
would
you
do in that
send the
situation.
email?
Yeah, would you send the email? Would you let send the email just a recap, even if you ended up like they have to take the credit, whatever, you'll
Yeah.
get the credit, you came up with the idea, but would you still
Hmm.
send the email to document that conversation? That's interesting.
Mm.
Or is it better to just in the future
Be
just
proactive.
proactively, like, not maybe you just don't brainstorm with that person out loud. Maybe you have to do it over maybe you'll do it a little bit. Maybe you won't share your full ideas. You'll hold back. You'll say, I need time to think about it. And then you'll send your email with a bunch of your ideas like, hey, listen, Lucy, good conversation earlier. I appreciate you bringing me in. Here's some ideas I had based on your ideas. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
some more about this.
Yeah,
Then you again have a proactive documented trail
exactly.
of,
Yeah.
these are my ideas ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it comes back together to what you mentioned at the beginning. Really pausing and reflecting. Is this battle in a way worth fighting? And do I want to just being focused on being proactive? Um, because maybe there is a fear or worry. It also may depend on personality. For some
Exactly.
people, I don't have a problem to send any other email. I just need to let them know where's the boundary. And they don't care as much about the
That's true.
consequences. If the other person gets upset, it's too bad. This is what I need. For other people, that can be very triggering when the other person gets upset at them. And
Very
so they
true.
might not choose, you know what, I don't have the bandwidth right now to deal with a boss that is really angry at me. So maybe
Yeah.
I'm not gonna send the email right now, but I'll be really proactive moving forward. It's
Yeah.
also pausing and reflecting what works for you right now. What might
Mm,
be the best strategy for you in this situation at this moment? Consider your
yeah.
bandwidth.
Yeah. So I think we came up with some good ideas. We talked about what not to do. So number one, don't feel like you need credit for everything, right? It's
Yeah.
it's not assuming bad intent, not
Mhm.
gossiping, not retaliating, and definitely
Not
not making
shouting.
any accusations, no shouting, right?
Hmm.
Even though you want to, and that's fine if you want to. It's okay to feel that way.
Yes.
um, I will say this, I guess if you don't care about working there anymore, then I
Mhm.
guess you could just yell. If you're like, that's it, this is the
I'm done.
straw that broke the back. I'm out of here. On my way out, I'm going to yell. You could do that, I guess.
It's the
But really,
rage quitting.
what you could do, what you should do is what we were talking about is just being calm, going with a game plan, figure out what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, how they're going to think through how they might react, and
Hmm.
what you might want to do to prepare for that, just
Yep.
emotionally and kind of how you're going to structure the conversation.
Hmm.
Assess severity. So assess like, is this something you really need to address, or is it a minor thing? Um,
Hmm.
I think we agree most of the times you should at least say something,
Hmm.
right? Even if it's minor.
Yeah,
Um, the outcome may not be you need them to give you credit, but you might want to say something so that they
absolutely.
don't do
Yeah.
it again.
Hmm.
But then focus more on being proactive. Focus more
Hmm.
on being collaborative at the beginning,
Yeah.
protecting yourself in documentation if you need to. Share your ideas or what you're doing with your boss right away,
Hmm. Yep.
more often than not, so they know what you're doing ahead of
Absolutely.
time. Right? Asking why, and just going into that conversation and being really curious, asking what is going on. We say ask why, but not really asking the literally why, but
A
just asking what
specific
do they think
why.
is going on. Yeah.
Yes. The
And
reason.
you could, based on your personality, you could be more forceful with it. You could say, last week we talked about this and I had this idea, and you talked about it today as if it was your idea. Or you could be more gentle and use those softening words, but
Hmm.
really you're still asking what's going on, trying to see if they know that they took credit for
Yeah.
your idea, or remember if they remember the events the same way you did,
Hmm.
right? And you just have to be thoughtful about kind of what's your end game, what's your goal out of that conversation. Do you need credit? Do you need them to acknowledge you? Do
Hmm.
you want them to just say sorry? Which is hard to get somebody to say sorry to you, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it just depends on their personality and their values.
Exactly. Yep.
But you can still aim for that as a goal if you want to. I just don't know how
If that's
realistic that's going
important.
to be all
Hmm.
the time.
Yeah. True.
It might be really important to you, I guess I would say but is it realistic? That's the important thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I think the takeaway big question I always ask leaders, or I always think about even for myself, is do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? So is it more important
Yeah.
that you get credit for this, or is it more important that this project is done, or this work is done, or this idea is implemented, right?
Hmm.
You have to decide that. Like nobody can decide that for you. You have to
Yeah.
decide for yourself what's more important in that
Mhm.
situation or that idea or that work.
Makes sense. So really, what really matters to you the most in that situation?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other big kind of summaries or takeaways for you?
You kind of did a great job summarizing it. Anything else? I would just highlight for those people that are on the more empathetic side and they don't want other people to be upset with them. Really learning speak up for yourself. Because a lot of time, if you don't give them even an opportunity to get to know you, that's something actually you didn't like, there's no way in the future that you that you can be successful in that regard.
Right.
So really giving both yourself and the other person an opportunity to learn something about you. Hey, this is what happened. And maybe again, if we don't assume the worst intention, it could be they just forgot, or they just had so many ideas, they're not organized, or they were stressed out, and just like you've
Yeah.
mentioned in that example.
Right. Right.
So better speak up rather than be silent all the time.
Right. Yeah. Empathy for the win.
So, and
Communication.
communication to making our work and personal lives better.
Yeah.
Now, if you have any scenario that's happening for you right now, and you still feel, even after listening to our episode, that I would love to, this is all fine, the strategies, but my situation is different. Please send us an email, let us know what is your situation, and we can even role play and maybe put a short video on YouTube around this. That's our gift and offer for you. Hope additional support.
Absolutely. Well, Lucy, good topic. Thanks for today.
Thank you, Chris. And we'll see you next time.
See you next week.